26% of sexual offences are committed by foreign nationals here in the UK. 41% of sexual offences in Derbyshire are committed by foreign nationals as well. The percentage of British nationals living in Derbyshire, I believe, is around 90%. So that is incredibly disproportionate. There have been a few police stations in the UK who have put up notices explaining that if you are to have suffered particular crimes, to report these crimes online because they aren't as serious. I think it was Kent police station actually came under a lot of scrutiny for this. On their leaflet outside that said which crimes you should be reporting online, rape and sexual assault was on that list.
I rang the police and their response was no crime was actually committed and I couldn't know what his motivations were, right? The police always says, oh, there was nothing we could have done. No, actually, most of the time there is a lot that you could have done.
Integrating multicultural populations can strain resources, and this leads to compromises within women's safety, and so women's safety is under-prioritised compared to their broader social cohesion goals, for example. They've seen an 80% decrease in sexual offences since this has been implemented.
Before we start the conversation, may I ask, if you want to support the show, all you have to do is press subscribe. It massively helps me with continuing to talk to fascinating people you want to hear from. And let's be honest, it also helps me turn this from an expensive hobby to, well, a less expensive one. Your support means the world to me, so thank you, and let's jump straight in. We will be discussing today the subjects that our politicians are essentially allergic to: sex crime and immigration. How strong do you think is the link between the two?
I think there is a rather strong link between the two. Obviously, we know that there is issues with sexual offences here in the UK regardless, but we need to take into account that 26% of sexual offences are committed by foreign nationals here in the UK. And if you look into it, on a deeper level, what you tend to see is that the outstanding amount is committed by British nationals. However, we aren't given a breakdown of the ethnicity of those British nationals here in the UK, and I think that's something that we need to see. However, if you look at a lot of the areas across the UK, for example, I know that there is London, I believe it's 66.9% of sexual offences are actually perpetrated by foreign nationals in London City. And if you look all over the UK, there seems to be quite a relevant kind of topic, and it tends to be something that's happening all over the country. For example, I know that 41% of sexual offences in Derbyshire are committed by foreign nationals as well, and I believe the percentage of British nationals living in Derbyshire, I believe, is around 90%. So that is incredibly disproportionate and rather concerning. So I do believe that there is a strong correlation between immigration and sexual offences.
Now, when we are looking at these statistics, are we talking about convictions?
So these are arrests of foreign nationals who have been arrested for sexual offences. Unfortunately, it's very hard to find the conviction data.
Yeah. And I think one of the things the reason why I'm asking is I seem to remember seeing the 1% of all sexual crime actually leads to convictions. So the fact that sex crime, because of the nature of it, is so difficult to prove anyway, I was wondering whether the fact that we are just talking about convictions would be masking way, way bigger problem underneath. I suppose with the arrests, we've got a little bit more of that data being captured of just how big the problem is, even though naturally there will be the problem is going to be probably even a little bit bigger than the actual arrests suggest. And I think in Paris, I can't remember the exact figures, but it is something like, I think, early 80s, 82% of sexual crime is committed by foreign nationals. And I think they only represent something like 20%.
Right. Wow. That's incredibly disproportionate, isn't it?
Yeah. check me on the exact statistics, but it is huge. Like, this proportion is massive. And obviously for years and years and years we've been told that immigration is good economically, culturally, all that. People don't really want to talk about the fact that there are downsides that come with immigration. So let's just sort of try and dig a little bit deeper. When we are looking at the statistic as well, 26% of all offences committed in Britain are by foreign nationals. What is the percentage currently of foreign nationals in the country?
I
Can
believe
you
it's
refresh my memory?
18%.
Okay.
I believe it's 18.
Okay.
I think that makes, I think around it's 11.5 million, but I believe it's around 18%, yeah.
Yeah. And then part of it is going to be, some of these figures are going to be muddled by the fact that after 5 years, you can apply for a British passport of living in the country. So technically, you could have millions of foreign nationals by birth that do now carry the British citizenship. Hence, they are classed as British, but the culture that they come from isn't necessarily British. And then obviously the second generation, which is also has shown increased violence and violent tendencies, that again isn't really being discussed. Now, when you started looking into this, what is the actual data that the police is releasing about this? How much are they actually giving you to go off?
So we aren't actually given much to go off. A lot of the statistics are actually from 2021 to 2023, and even then, there is a lot of blurred lines within that. We're not given, I would say, we're not given an adequate enough amount of data, and they give you very vague data. So they'll tell you, like you said about them, about British nationals. We don't know what their cultural background or any other background is of these individuals who have claimed citizenship here in the UK. And that's not expressed. We don't have any of that data available, unfortunately, and we're not able to find out how many of those British nationals who are from a different background who have committed sexual offences. We aren't able to access that. And also, as well with that, you see that in a lot of the sexual offence statistics have only been recorded up to 2023. I believe they've recently released new data. However, again, it is very vague. But I know by the end of the year ending March 2023, I think there was 188,893 arrests for sexual offences. But that only makes up 19% of reports. So they basically assume that that is only 19% of cases, because the reports show that only 19% of sexual offences are actually recorded, are actually mentioned to the police, if that makes sense. So at the moment, if you actually work out how many sexual offences that would be if we were to look at the 100% mark, it would be a phenomenal number.
Wow. Okay. Why is the government not tracking it, do you think?
Why do I think the government's not tracking it? There is a lot of different, I guess there's a lot of different views on this. I know that many people think it's for financial gain, to do with trading policies, etc., abroad. So if we are, if the more individuals we take in from abroad, the easier it is to trade. And I think this is the reason the government are ignoring it. I think it is to line their own pockets ultimately at the end of the day. I also think that people don't want to be labelled as xenophobic or racist, when in reality it's not racist to point out facts. And if there is data that's showing a significant portion of foreign nationals here in the UK are committing sexual offences, and not only sexual offences but other offences as well, violent offences, etc., I don't believe it's racist to say it. Well, I know it's not racist to say so. And I think that's the fear of the government. They don't want to appear to not accept these individuals over here simply for the fact that they like to line their own pockets personally.
Okay, interesting. You see, what do I think about it? What do I think? Why do they not express the facts? I've always thought that it was just politically inconvenient. Like the politics in British society are just so very polite on the surface, and there is a lot of double speak that is happening. Like there is a lot of that is being assumed, but it just starts to get into the situation where the reality is being twisted, because what they are saying is so, what we are hearing from the government is so obviously not what is unfolding in front of our eyes, is that sort of double speak and inferring a lot of these things doesn't work when what they are telling you is just not factually correct. And I think, like you say, people don't have the data, so we can't really assess whether the government is telling the truth or not. But what we see on the streets is definitely confirming many suspicions of people that we are being lied to en masse by the government, by a lot of the mainstream media. So another thing that I wanted to discuss with you about is there is a graph about the sex offences that I think started at 2000. It started earlier, I think, in the early 2000s. But the sexual offences in the UK have started ticking upwards fast since 2015. Now, 2015
Absolutely.
was the very start of the mass migration project. So they will always say, the people that are not convinced by that, they will always say the causation, correlation is not causation. And that potentially there are other things that could be affecting it. A lot of people are saying that it's because women are do now feel more confident to report the crime than they did, let's say, in 2014. How convincing do you find that argument?
I don't find it very convincing at all. For example, I know myself, I've suffered sexual harassment on the trains and sexual assault, and I won't report it because I know that in my heart of hearts, I know that the police won't do anything about it here in the UK. You can't, unless it's a severe case, I find it's not really taken seriously. I know that there have been a few police stations in the UK actually who have put up notices explaining that if you are to have suffered these particular crimes, to report these crimes online. Because they aren't as serious. And actually, I think it was Kent police station actually came under a lot of scrutiny for this. And on their leaflet outside that said which crimes you should be reporting online, rape and sexual assault was on that list. I'm sure they've probably changed that now due to the scrutiny. I'm sure they've fixed that situation. However, I do believe that many girls in the UK feel as though they aren't going to be listened to, and the police tend to come over and they'll talk to you about it and they'll take a statement and then you don't hear anything ever again. So I completely disagree. I don't think that's correct. I think if anything, people will be less likely to come forward about it.
Interesting. I mean, that's how we kind of got chatting, really, because I've told you about what happened to me. And what happened was I believe it was a near miss, 2020, just before lockdown. I was coming back from Manchester and my car was parked on the train station where I was living. And I don't even know how the hell it happened. I wasn't drinking or anything. I was just rushing to get on a train and I jumped on the wrong train, ended up in the village, sort of maybe 12, 14 miles away from where my car was. It was either Tuesday or Wednesday night, 11:30 at night, 11 o'clock. Nobody on the train station but me. and I was already waiting for the taxi driver because I've realized that I was in the wrong train. So I ordered a taxi. I knew that they will be a while. And as I was waiting, like nobody around, I'm already a little bit nervous, thinking, oh, this is not a situation that you want to get yourself in. And there is this taxi driver that is essentially Asian looking, pretending to be my taxi.
Wow.
I basically said, no, you're good, mate. And I sort of walked away. So he starts driving alongside me, saying how dangerous it is for young women like me to be on the streets on their own and all that. But he's saying it in such a creepy way. Like, it wasn't, I'm concerned for you, love. Like, can I just park my car there and just watch you to make sure that you get in a taxi all right? He essentially tried to lure me into his taxi. When none of that worked, at that point I was dialing the taxi like company number, trying to basically tell them like, where the hell is your driver? And he parks his taxi and is starting to follow me. So I turn around, start walking very quickly away from him, and there are these two fairly young lads that sort of came around the corner, drunk, completely drunk. If I wasn't in the situation that I was, I would be running away from these lads just in case, middle of the night, very chavvy looking guys. I'm sorry to use that language because they actually helped me. But normally at night, this is the assessment that I would make as a, woman on her own. I just sort of asked them whether they wouldn't mind like staying with me for a couple of minutes until my taxi gets here, because this guy is just trying to like drag me essentially into the taxi. I mean, he was trying to lure me in. It was absolutely horrid. At that point, I did think that I will become the statistic. Now, my taxi eventually gets in. The two guys, I mean, they sort of had some exchange of words with the guy, and the taxi driver just hid, and he sort of drove around the corner, but I could still see that he parked his taxi there. And my taxi driver takes me away. I ring the police, and their response was no crime was actually committed, and I couldn't know what his motivations were. Right. Lovely. So a lot of the time when I see these statistics, it really angers me, because it's like, when something happens, the police always says, oh, there was nothing we could have done. No, actually, most of the time, there is a lot that you could have done. Because it's unlikely that this guy wanted to help me out, let's be clear. And this guy just basically went on living his life without any bother from the police. Now, I had two guys that, fair point, they were drunk, but they were witnesses. I had the taxi company that knew that I was ringing them in distress, that I was being followed. I had the picture of the number plate of the car. Nobody cared. So, and that is not going to go down in any of the statistics, because essentially police told me that nothing wrong has happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like,
this is the problem.
So frustrating.
And that's the thing. So many, and I'm terribly sorry to hear about obviously what happened to you. That must have been really incredibly scary. But the thing is it's happening all lucky. Over the UK every single day, and women are being dismissed entirely over and over and over again, and it's not fair, and it's not right, and we're being treated as second-class citizens in this country. These people are allowed to get away with these horrific crimes because there isn't enough evidence, or there isn't, what it is they just don't want to follow it up. They don't want to follow it up. There's so much funding going on other things here in the UK. I think there's £1.8 billion a month that goes towards foreign aid and housing illegal immigrants. But they won't share out those funds to go elsewhere, so into police forces, in order for them to follow up on these said leads. And I think this is the problem. And like you said, it is complicity from the government. They don't want to take responsibility for what's going on, so they are essentially ignoring it and providing us with no evidence to show that this is a real problem. And I think people now are really starting to come forward and say, this is a real issue. 40 years ago, when the grooming gangs and everything, started to become quite prevalent in society, people honestly didn't have social media and the technology that we have today to report it. They didn't have X. Now that we have apps and other software such as X that gives us real life media, not the media that we see on TV that the government pay for and fund. Real media, real videos, and nothing is censored, you see. So I think now that we've got that, we're able to notice a difference, and we're able to notice that things really aren't quite as the government like to put it. And I think that's why this movement has become quite prevalent now. But it is terrible, and I'm so sorry that did happen to you, and it's awful because it's happening every single day and probably multiple times a day as well.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've had your own experience with that as well. But I think that there is a lot of harassment that comes from certain demographics, essentially. Like, there is no way to escape from it. And I've used to live in a town called Bolton, where one of the cases that you have on your website as a sort of case study or show just how dysfunctional the system is. And there is an area in Bolton where if you go in there on your own in the middle of the day, you will be catcalled, you will be harassed, you will be told to cover up and all that by not even wearing anything extraordinary, and you will be followed often. So I think for the government to try and continue saying to people, you're wrong, you're racist for saying that there is an issue, all cultures are the same, they are just going to get punished at upcoming elections. But I suppose that will be their problem to deal with. I think for the time being, the problem is that it's the vulnerable people in the society that are paying the price, women and children. Absolutely. The most, I think. Although I think there is quite a lot of stabbings as well going on, and that's mainly male that are dying in those. So I'm not even sure whether the statistics are showing that it's just women and children now. I think just the breakdown of the social contract is happening very, very quickly now. And I see it. I'm an immigrant, first generation immigrant, came from Poland in 2006. And I see such huge difference. Like when I first moved into the country, I used to live in a very, very, very rough area of Glasgow, like very rough. And I don't know whether it was just because I was naive back then, but I felt much safer in Glasgow back in 2006 than I would now walking on my own in the evening. I mean, I just don't do it anymore. What is your experience like commuting from work, especially in the winter months, for example, when it gets dark quicker? Like, are you having to implement some extra security measures for yourself?
Yeah, so I commute to work via the train, and unfortunately, where we live in an area where it's immigration tends to be incredibly high. They won't record that, obviously, but it's very prevalent. It's happening, and actually, we've noticed that a lot of migrants are being dropped off near the train station where I live, and they get on the train or on the buses, and the issue that I've had personally is my train goes to a major city here in the UK. I don't get off at the major city. I get off on one of the other stops, but I've suffered issues with being recorded by their mobile phones, showing videos of, so they'll be on FaceTime to their friends or family, or I don't even know who, and they'll show people on the train, young girls. There's college age girls as well on that train, so it's not just me that they're doing it to. And I was getting to the point where I was being followed home. I was being kind of pressed up against on public transport, and so me and my partner have kind of come with an agreement is I don't walk home now. He'll pick me up from the train station and he'll drop me off at the train station every morning and every night to ensure that I get home safely. And it is a shame because it is only about a 10-minute walk, and it's terrible. But I have to walk down a major high street, you see, and that seems to be where the problem lies, because there is a lot of shops in the area that are run by majority migrants or immigrants here in the UK. And they've kind of come over, they're foreign nationals, 100%. And so, yeah, a lot of those shops down there are run by foreign nationals. And I think that's why we have such an issue with them congregating in that area. It's getting to the point where I made a journey, a 5-minute journey, and I had 4 separate situations and incidents occur during that 5-minute journey. So it is getting to the point now where my partner doesn't really leave my side, which isn't really fair on either of us, We kind of want to be able to, I want to be able to walk to work without having, have to rely on him, and, he should, and vice versa. It is a shame, but that's what we've put in place personally. And I know that quite a few of my friends have, especially my friends online who I talk to via X, have had to do the same thing. Their partner will have to drop them off to work on a daily because it is just too unsafe not to.
Yeah, God. I mean, one of our tenants moved in here. We live about an hour away from the major city, and she moved over here with her boyfriend, even though she was working in the major city still, because she was followed a few times in the middle of the day in Manchester by a white van, clearly foreign drivers. And she basically said that one of them actually grabbed her, tried to get her in. And it was like, for her, that was like, enough, I'm moving out. And she basically said that was the middle of the day. It was reported, wasn't followed apparently. So I don't know how true it is, but that was what she told me when she moved in, and I was asking like why they chose this place essentially. So I think it's very sad that you don't need to look far to get the same theme of story repeating over and over again. There is something that I wanted to discuss with you, and it's a concept that came from the book by Louise Perry, and it was the Case Against Sexual Revolution. She was talking about the sexual asymmetry that exists between men and women. Essentially, we are on average much smaller, much lower in social sexuality, and in any culture, in any society, that is true. There is sexual asymmetry between men and women. But what it prompted me to think is that what we are essentially doing is increasing the sexual asymmetry that exists within the British society, because when we import young men from cultures that have even got way higher sexual asymmetry due to their, cultural beliefs about what women's place in society or relationship should be, for example, or how they are allowed to be treated, then we are essentially increasing that asymmetry that already exists in every single society and that every single society has to deal with. But it just feels to me quite unfair that not only we are not dealing with the sexual asymmetry that does exist in every society, but we seem to be making it actively worse. What are your thoughts about that?
I have to agree, absolutely. I know that one of our demands for the Women's Safety Initiative is actually to put a cap on immigration, if not eradicate it entirely, but particularly a cap on immigration, especially on those who originate from countries that facilitate femicide and countries that do treat women as second-class citizens. And these women, not even second-class citizens, they are treated absolutely horrendously. I mean, you've got to look at Afghanistan. They can't sing, they can't visit a doctor, they can't even talk to each other. And I think when you import people from those countries, particularly where we know that marital rape isn't a crime in these countries specifically either, and rape isn't taken as seriously in those countries as it may be here. For example, I know that in lots of Middle Eastern countries, the woman will actually be punished for the rape because it is classed as infidelity. So I think when you bring that culture to a country that is it's an alien culture to us, I think that's where the problem lies, because women over here, men, generally, obviously we know that we have issues with domestic violence and violence towards women, but generally the overall oversight of how women are portrayed in our society are as equals. We've had the feminist movement, we've moved forward, and unfortunately these countries haven't. So when you do place these individuals who have such horrific attitudes towards women into a society where women are treated equally and fairly amongst other men here, that actually obviously is going to cause a problem. I don't see how that is. It's not rocket science. It's absolutely going to cause a problem. So I have to agree, absolutely. We can't bring people into a country who is, they know no different because they've been brought up in that atmosphere and in that country, and so they've not seen women like me and you working and doing doing things that women in their countries just wouldn't. So they're obviously going to treat us the same way that they would treat women in their country. And I think that that's something that maybe the government probably didn't quite anticipate, and if they did anticipate it and they've kept it quiet, then more for them, because quite honestly I think that's utterly disgusting, because if they did apprehend that to begin with, then I think we've got a greater problem on our hands than we think.
There is a lack of honesty essentially about the problem, about the scale of the issue. Even when we had plenty research coming from Europe suggesting that foreign nationals, and there are certain countries that are especially prone to these crimes, the research from Denmark, the research from France, Belgium, I think as well, and Netherlands. Everyone over here, by everyone I sort of mean the government and the media, were really quiet about it, and it's almost as if the immigration that we get is somehow different, that somehow by just crossing the channel, whether it's on a boat or a plane, you rid yourself of your culture that you come with, and you arrive in the UK, in the land of plenty that perhaps it used to be, and that somehow you are just going to be so grateful for the fact that you're here that you are just going to buy wholeheartedly into a completely foreign culture to you, that you're going to forget what you grew up with for first however many years of your life. Where do you think this dishonesty is coming from when it comes to the media? I would like to get your opinion on that, because there is a dishonesty. Even recently, when the grooming gangs, there was this interview that Emily Maitlis did with Rupert Lowe, where she accused him of talking about it because he was racist. And if it was just a normal question, then okay, you could just say she was sort of playing the devil's advocate. But what got me was the sneering in her voice, on her face, whilst she was asking this question.
Mm-hmm.
She meant it. That wasn't playing the devil's advocate. So why do you think the media and the government seem to be completely refusing to accept the fact that foreign nationals do bring increased sexual crime into the country?
It's a difficult question, isn't it? Because the average human being just wouldn't act the way that this government has. Do you know what I mean? It's not something that we'd apprehend doing. So I think it's hard to answer that question. But again, I would say the media, I believe, they will believe anything the government tells them. So the media will essentially, for example, bigger media corporations, anything that they hear is straight from the government. That's my personal view, and I'm pretty sure it's the truth. And I feel like, so they're just going to agree with whatever the government put out there, and I believe that's entirely how that's done. As for the government, it's difficult. I think politicians avoid confronting sexual cultural practices, sensitive cultural practices, to maintain essentially voter support. I think a lot of their policies and their narratives and their agendas are aimed towards and are it's hard to discuss, but I would say that a lot of their narratives and agendas are accepted more by maybe foreign nationals or diversity groups more than maybe we as British citizens would accept those narratives that they're putting forward and those agendas. And I think that if they were to confront, sensitive cultural practices, they would be accused of xenophobia, which is ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. But I feel like there's a number of different things. For example, I think that, like I said earlier on, we've got policy trade-offs. So integrating multicultural populations can strain resources. And this leads to compromises within women's safety. And so women's safety is under prioritized compared to their broader social cohesion goals, for example. So I do think we do have an issue where the government would much rather line their pockets and ensure that they're being voted in and they're getting the votes from those who from foreign nationals and those who do come from a different background to British citizens. I think they are trying to direct the vote that way because they're predicting that by 2060 white people will be the ethnic minority here in the country because of essentially by natural demographics such as birth and death rates and immigration policies. So I think they know that this is going to happen. So they're trying to get certain individuals who are foreign nationals or who are maybe not inherently white British, for example. So obviously we have a lot of British nationals over here who have claimed citizenship. So I think they're trying to get those to agree with them because they will eventually be the majority. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because birth and death rates are declining. I mean, you've got multiple theories. You've got the Great Replacement theory as well, which is important to note. Obviously, this is quite a controversial theory, and I'd like to just say this is WSI aside. This is just me essentially just kind of exploring the endless possibilities as to why the government may be doing such things, but there is an increase in immigration from non-white regions, and this could create a perception of deliberate population replacement. Again, this is just a theory, and considering the country have expressed their outrage time and time again regarding crimes perpetrated by foreign nationals, and they have been ignored time and time again, it does look like intentional marginalization, if that makes sense, especially when politicians dismiss concerns about demographic change. I know that there was this article written, I think his name was Josh Magnus, and he was from Cornell University, and they honestly, researchers have honestly stated that white people dating or marrying or procreating with white people is called sexual racism, which is just utterly ridiculous. It is actually utterly, yes, it's utterly ridiculous.
Oh my God.
And it makes you wonder whether they are pushing a narrative to ensure that white children aren't, a product of same race relationships. It is just a theory. I don't know if you've ever looked into it. Again, it's a controversial one, but if we are going to be the minority, it's not something we can rule out.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it that way. We are going to be the minority very soon, simply because the white British population is their fertility rate is much lower than some of the incoming immigrants. Now, these immigrants will get older, they will have children, and currently they are tracking their fertility rates is almost double to what the British fertility rate is, like native British fertility. And I've looked into the Great Replacement only very recently. Like, I knew what it was about, but I've actually listened to the interview that Harrison Pitt did with the name of the gentleman that actually wrote about it, French older guy that was refused entry into the UK because obviously he's got such a dangerous ideas. And I found him persuasive in certain points, very calm mannered, and I couldn't quite figure out where where a lot of this controversy was, because like it is happening, whether by design or by just sheer incidents and coincidence, that is happening. But what gets me about these type of sort of narratives that are being pushed in academia is if you were to come out with an opposite statement. So if you basically said that if it's Black people deciding to marry and have kids with other Black people, that is somehow white racism, you would be cancelled immediately, taken off the mainstream media. How dare you?
Yeah,
and somehow
absolutely.
when it goes the other way around, it's being celebrated. And what gets me is that just ever constant, not just double standards, it's just two complete standards. One is going constantly in the direction of white bad, minority good, but it has to be a certain minority. So I'm not getting any points from the woke. So my beliefs are not leftist enough, or not libertarian enough, or not whatever, and my fiance is white, and our kids are white and blue eyes, so I'm terrible guilty of the breeding the white genes essentially. But this is the crazy stuff that we actually got to in the culture, like the race arguments and like the breeding between people that used to be the arguments of like early 20th century. And I kind of feel like right now, when we've got such a big issues to deal with, it's being revived just the other way around in the name of progress. And it's just insane.
I think that's the thing. I think there's a lot of people that feel like because of British history that we have no right to feel offended by racist remarks made against us, because inherently, due to our history, we were inherently racist, I guess. So people say now that, and people have this kind of idea that we shouldn't feel the same way when, like you said, the exact same thing is happening to us. There is multiple occasions where I'll be on a train and it's not, there are women from other backgrounds, and the way they treat me is horrific. It's I've been pushed, I've been kind of shoved. Yeah, I've been,
Wow.
had individuals kiss their teeth at me just for simply existing, and it's it is just uncomfortable. I wouldn't do that to somebody else, and I wouldn't expect to receive it. And I just think we are kind of becoming a bit of a divisive society now, and on the topic of the sexual racism, which again is completely ridiculous. Another agenda that the left push, obviously we know that we have our our LGBT BTQ plus community.
Yeah.
Isn't it their belief that you should love who you want to love? So isn't that also another point that the left try and make, and now they're kind of contradicting it with, well, no, if you date white people and you're white, you're racist. So I just feel like that's a big contradiction in itself between completely, multiple different agendas and narratives that the left like to push. So yeah, I just wanted to add that in, because I just thought that's completely, ridiculous that they're pushing you should love who you want to love, but then telling you you're racist for doing it. It's rather interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, another example of this, and everyone will know about it. Like, you will notice it. There are no ads on the TV where you've got white couple.
Yeah,
No ads with white couple. It always is mother or father will be of a different race, and it's like I feel like we are being just programmed to take this as a sort of we are being programmed, I think, to move the window of what is classed as racism into way more of the fringes. I actually think that this is what's happening, and I think that's why we are seeing um, such an outrage about any of these things being noticed, because there is a tribalism element within all races, and we see it in very, very innocent things. You know, if you're on the other side of the country and you bump into someone from your country, your city, or just the place that you used to grow up with, and there is that immediate connection. That is the positive spin of tribalism. It also has got a negative spin to it, but I genuinely don't think that trying to pretend that tribalism only applies to people with our skin color is the way forward.
agreed.
um so anyway, moving on swiftly. So
That's okay.
tell me, what is Women's Safety Initiative? What is that you're doing now and what you're hoping to achieve in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're only 2 months old, so we're a relatively new organisation. But we're aiming to expose the dangers of mass immigration. So obviously, with allowing these illegal and unvetted individuals over here, we have no idea what their past is. We have no idea what they've done. We have no idea why they've left their country. So we're importing people over here, and particularly from countries that have particular views against women. So we note that there are actually 48 nationalities that have a higher arrest rate than British nationals. 5 of them being from Albania, Afghanistan, Iraq, Algeria, and Somalia. So it is a prevalent problem here in the UK, and I think that's what we wanted to bring up. We face a lot of scrutiny. We're called racist a lot, obviously, because of what we stand for. But as far as we're concerned, it's not racist to point out facts. It's not racist, to point out the facts that the government themselves have released. So it's we are just trying to push for multiple different we're pushing for multiple different policies at this moment in time. So, for example, like I said earlier on, we want to introduce a cap on immigration. Like I said, particularly from those who originate from other countries that facilitate femicide, etc. We also want to ensure the immediate deportation of foreign nationals who have committed or do commit sexual offences or other violent crimes in the UK, because those who have done so, quite frankly, don't deserve to be here, and they don't deserve to walk amongst our communities. Because it is just wrong on so many levels. It's just not fair. Especially considering we have worked so hard as a society to try and decrease the level of sexual offences that are occurring, and preferably stop them. But we would like to decrease them for what we can. We know it's not a goal where we have a sexual offence free society. We know that's not something we'll ever achieve. But by doing that, we do want to increase police presence in the community. So policing and police presence, particularly in areas where women feel particularly unsafe. And this is just to create more of a trust in the police force, and to create more of a trust in police and the police presence. And another thing, actually, which I wanted to touch on earlier on when you spoke about the taxi incident. We're also calling for mandatory CCTV in taxis and private hire vehicles, because sexual offences in taxis actually rose by 73% in the past decade. And we actually had a conversation this morning, I believe. Yeah, it was this morning, with the leader of the Portsmouth Independent Party. I believe his name's George Madwick.
Mm-hmm.
They've implemented CCTV in taxis in Portsmouth, and they've seen an 80% decrease in sexual offences since this has been essentially implemented, which is a staggering find, because if you actually look at it shows that people will commit these offences, but because they're on camera, they just won't do it. So I think that's something that's incredibly important to our cause, and that is something that we have not yet discussed actually.
Mm-hmm.
So this was honestly this we only found out this data this morning. So those are kind of our demands essentially. Our what we would like to push for. We have other policies and stuff that we're trying to work for, in order to create a safer environment, especially for women and children here in the UK. That's essentially what we're all about.
Given that you are only 2 months old,
Mm-hmm.
I have noted the responses of some of the politicians to your cause, and retweeting it, basically saying it's just blatant racism. So let's just sort of take that accusation, and can you just unpack it for us? Because clearly it is something that, you know, people will throw at you.
Obviously, we have been scrutinised quite a bit by multiple different people in regard to our initiative. And what people need to understand is we get a lot of people explaining that they don't quite understand why we don't care about the other percentage of people that are British nationals here in the UK committing sex offences, and we do care, but the problem is when you're bringing over individuals from places that do treat women in horrendous manners, we do run the risk of increased sexual offences, and the people that are speaking about the other 74% of sexual offences aren't actually taking into account the 26%, which is what we're doing. So we're not pointing out, we're not racist in any capacity. Pointing out that foreign nationals commit a significant portion of sex crimes here in the UK is not racist. The statement is grounded on verifiable data, and focuses on the criminal behaviour of these individuals, as do we. I think it's just one of those things where we are just going to have to tackle it head on as time goes on. But it's certainly not a movement. It's certainly not a racist movement in any capacity. It is just recognising what other people won't. Also, we aren't just out here protecting white girls. We are also protecting other girls as well, from other ethnic backgrounds and other backgrounds. For example, we look at women's backgrounds from domestic abuse and domestic violence, sexual assault, and also we do target women who have suffered FGM as well. And a lot of these women are from different backgrounds. They're not from British, essentially inherently British backgrounds. So our organisation is not an attempt to cover up racism in the name of women's safety. What it is pointing out what other people will not. Other people will focus on white British men causing and perpetrating sexual offences towards women, and they do ignore the other 26%, that are committed by foreign nationals. And what we are doing is simply pointing out what they won't, and that is just the fact of the matter. Like I said, there's only so much we can push, and with the agenda nowadays and people's beliefs nowadays, they quite honestly, whether or not they listen to us is another story. I don't think we'll ever truly be able to break down people's views on us being racist, and which is a shame. But I think what we would like to put out there to people is that we are simply just recognising what other people do not, and we are just trying to keep women safe in this country. It's been an ongoing problem since the beginning of time, women's safety, and I think when when people will not acknowledge these issues in the name of diversity and in the name of racism, it takes somebody else to stand up to do so, and we are those people to stand up to do so, because the government won't. So I think it is important for us to spread the word, and ensure that people know exactly what's going on, because whilst you hide behind the name of diversity, you aren't truly realising what is going on in the country. And in reality, words, may harm some people. What is worse, rape or racism? I think that's the one thing we've got on our hands right now, and people seem to think that people absolutely lose their minds the second somebody says something that may be classed as racist, but the second you bring up rape, it's just another statistic to them, and they don't respond the same way. There isn't the same uproar from people when somebody is raped, opposed to when somebody posts a video on the internet of somebody being racist towards them. And don't get me wrong, it's terrible. I don't condone racism in any respect, but people don't show the same outrage when it comes to rape, and we're fed up with that.
I think my only pushback on that for you would be, it's not rape or racism, it's rape or allegations of racism. Because I actually haven't seen anything in your materials that was actually racist. So, okay, for the people that want to help you out as an organization, that want to spread your work, what is it that as an organization you want people to do to support your cause?
It's hard to kind of bring things up nowadays because you do suffer certain cultures like cancel culture. What I would say for us to help WSI out, or if you want to get involved, I would say share as much as you can in order to get to a larger target, to a larger target audience of people who do have similar concerns, because there are loads of people out there that aren't aware of us and do have the same concerns. So I would say to repost, etc. Also, you can join a membership online. We have an online membership for you to join. So if you would like to be on our mailing list to find out all sorts of information and be given updates on what we're doing and where, you can do that also. And generally just you've got to fight back, obviously in a non-violent manner, but fight back. And if people do accuse you of racism for calling out facts and for being concerned for women's safety, don't allow them to do so. Don't allow them to put you down that way, because at the end of the day, we are the ones suffering, and like you said, it is allegations. It's only simply allegations of racism that we are suffering, because we aren't racist. We are simply just trying to help the women of our country out, and we would appreciate any help possible. We also have organised protests and meetings and even events and socials. So if anyone would like to come along, they are more than happy to.
Okay, and where can people find you online?
So it's womansafety.uk. And you can also find
you personally?
And me personally, I've got an X account. My X account is called, it's sorry, bear with me. I will link to it. Thank you. Give it a link if that's okay. It's just trying to remember the name of it. It's Morgan WSI 15434. That's my X account.
Okay, Morgan, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you'll continue with your mission. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Morgan from Women's Safety Initiative.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Wisdom Rebellion. Before you go, if you enjoyed the conversation, please consider subscribing. It massively helps with keeping the show on the road so we can all build a wiser world together. And if you loved this video, you will also love this one. I'll see you there.